Hi, welcome back to Through the Bible, Women's Bible Study. Today we're looking at Genesis 19, the story of Sodom and Gomorrah. So last session, Abraham had met up with God and two travelers, and at the end they come and overlook the Dead Sea Valley, and they see the 5 cities, and God reveals the plan he has for Sodom. And after some discussion, he agrees if there are 10 good men in the city, he will spare the city. So now we pick up in Genesis 19, verses 1 through 3. The 2 angels came to Sodom in the evening, and Lot was sitting in the gate of Sodom. When Lot saw them, he rose to meet them and bowed himself with his face to the earth and said, "My lords, please turn aside to your servant's house and spend the night and wash your feet. Then you may rise up early and go on your way." They said, "No, we will spend the night in the town square." But he pressed them strongly. So they turned aside to him and entered his house. And he made them a feast and baked unleavened bread, and they ate. This is the first time we see that these 2 travelers are angels. So Lot's life, there's been a progression. He started off with Abram. Then he went from looking toward Sodom in Genesis 13:10 to pitching his tent toward Sodom, Genesis 13:12, to living in Sodom, Genesis 14:12, and losing everything when Sodom was attacked. Now back at Sodom, he's sitting at the gate. That means he's a city leader. That's where city business was taken care of by the judges of the city. So he has just gone from seeing Sodom to being an integral part of it. 2 Peter 2:7-8 says, Lot was a righteous man, but was grieved by the sin he saw around him. Because of his deep compromise, few of his family and none of the city are saved. Compromise destroyed his testimony. Was it wrong to live in Sodom? Was it wrong to be a leader in Sodom? For us, is it wrong to live with worldly people? Is it wrong to be a leader or a boss in secular society? The issue boils down to this. Who is going to influence whom? God doesn't want his people to be totally isolated from the world. He wants us to be salt and light and be an influence on the world around us, not have the world be an influence on us. Do you affect the world, or does the world affect you? Again, in this, we see Oriental hospitality, the bowing down, the calling them Lord. And again, it is urgent. He makes them unleavened bread. It's the first time we hear about unleavened bread. The rabbinical midrash says that this was the Passover, but that's reading too much into it. It just means it was a quick meal. They didn't have time to let the bread rise. Verse 4 and 5 says, But before they lay down, the men of the city, the men of Sodom, both young and old, all the people to the last man surrounded the house. And they called to Lot, Where are the men who came to you tonight? Bring them out to us that we may know them. There is no question what is in the mind of these men. They came to sexually abuse and rape. This was not Oriental hospitality. It was sin. They were doing this for their own violent and sexual gratification. Josephus, the Jewish historian that lived around the time of Jesus, says that these angels were beautiful creatures, and that just drove the lust of these men of Sodom. It says the men were from throughout the city. It shows the entire city was violent and immoral, that this was common among the men of Sodom. Ezekiel 16 compares Judah to Sodom, saying they were like sisters. In it, he mentions the sins of pride, gluttony, idleness, not taking care of the poor and needy. He called them haughty and committed sins before God. This shows that Sodom had many sins. When we think of Sodom, we think of sexual sin, but they had all sorts of sin. And homosexuality was among them, but it's not worse than adultery or stealing. It's still a sin. They asked to have the men handed over so they could know them in a biblical way. So we don't know what other sins they were guilty of. But we know pride, gluttony, idleness, not taking care of the poor and needy, and this sex for their gratification with no thought of their victims. Verse 6 through 9 says, Lot went out to the men at the entrance, shut the door after him, and said, I beg you, my brothers, do not act so wickedly. Behold, I have 2 daughters who have not known any man. Let me bring them out to you, and do to them as you please. Only do nothing to these men, for they have come under the shelter of my roof. But they said, Stand back. And they said, The fellow came to sojourn, and he has become the judge. Now we will deal worse with you than with them. Then they pressed hard against the man Lot and drew near to break the door down. Lot and these men have a completely different standard of what is wicked and what wasn't. The men of Sodom, they were just exercising their rights to love whomever they wanted, the way they want to. Lot thought it was wicked. Lot knew God, thought it was wicked. So Lot's offer of his daughters, that's horrible. There's no justification. But remember the low place women had in the world in contrast to the high place of any guest in one's home. Thankfully, when you study the Bible, God never intended women to be treated lowly. And Jesus comes and he exalts women. But under the sacred obligations of hospitality, a guest was to be protected more than your own family. Good thing his offer was rejected. Not only rejected, but the crowd says, now we're going to take everything, including you. And we're going to see there are going to be problems between Lot and his daughters. And maybe this is one of the reasons, if they knew that their father was offering them to the crowd, that they may have lost any respect they had for him. Maybe Lot thought by compromising he might reach these men, but the opposite happened. They have absolutely no respect for him. Verse 10 and 11, But the men reached out their hands and brought Lot into the house with them and shut the door. And they struck with blindness the men who were at the entrance of the door, both small and great, so that they wore themselves out, groping for the door. It must have taken a great supernatural strength to do what the angels did. Maybe Lot is trying to suddenly figuring out these are not normal guests. It was obviously supernatural when the men were struck blind. And they're not only physically blind, this physical blindness matches their moral blindness. This was more than just a temporary blindness. And notice they keep groping for the door. They are not giving up. They want what they want. Verses 12 through 14. Then the men said to Lot, Have you anyone else here? Sons-in-law, sons, daughters, or anyone you have in the city? Bring them out of this place. For we are about to destroy this place, because the outcry against his people has become great before the Lord, and the Lord has sent us to destroy it. So Lot went out and said to his sons-in-law, who were to marry his daughters, Up, get out of this place, for the Lord is about to destroy the city. But he seemed to his sons-in-law to be jesting. Now, angels are not omniscient, meaning they don't know everything. They know what God tells them. They didn't know the number and the location of members of Lot's family, so they ask. Now, Lot's daughters are they're betrothed. They're not married, but their betrothal means their fiancés are considered sons-in-law. Now, for the first time, Lot hears why these guests have come to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah. Sodom was destined for judgment. When God was talking with Abram, he knew how many righteous people there were. But God wanted to spare Lot and his family. Lot goes and talks to the sons-in-law, and he's completely serious, but they think he's joking. They don't have respect for him. This poor guy doesn't have any respect. Verse 15 and 16. As morning dawned, the angels urged Lot, saying, "Up, take your wife and your 2 daughters who are here, lest you be swept away in the punishment of the city." But he lingered. So the men seized him and his wife and his 2 daughters by the hand, the Lord being merciful to him, and they brought him out and set him outside the city. No sons-in-law. They made their choice, the wrong one. But Lot is reluctant to leave. His heart is in Sodom. His family's with him, so it's things. This is the second time he's going to lose everything. A lack of urgency to obey God was just a sign of his compromise. Remember, God had agreed to spare Sodom and Gomorrah if there were 10 people. There weren't, only 4. God did not spare the city, but he still answered the heart of Abraham's prayer by bringing Lot and his family out of Sodom, even if it's not exactly what Lot seemed to want. The angels had a mission, and they were going to complete their mission. There were 4 to be saved. The angels had 2 hands each. You could say the angels had their hands full. There was no one else. They couldn't grab anymore. Verse 17 through 20. And as they brought them out and said, "Escape for your life. Do not look back or stop anywhere in the valley. Escape to the hills, lest you be swept away." And Lot said to them, "Oh no, my lords, behold, your servant has found favor in your sight, and you have shown me great kindness in saving my life. But I cannot escape to the hill, lest the disaster overtake me and I die. Behold, the city is near enough to flee to, and it is a little one. Let me escape there. Is it not a little one? And my life will be saved." He said to them, "Behold, I grant you this favor also, that I will not overthrow the city of which you have spoken. Escape there quickly, for I can do nothing till you arrive there." Therefore, the name of the city was called Zoar. The angels know what's coming, and it's urgent. Get out of here. And they say, don't look back. Important to remember. It's important for us. They were to leave evil behind and not turn back. For us, once we turn to Jesus, we're not to turn around to our old life. So Lot thinks he can't outrun the disaster to come. That's a bit of a lack of faith. Don't you think if God were going to send angels to save you, he would save you? He would make sure you had a way to escape. Apparently, these mountains are to the east. Abraham's to the west. Why not run toward Abraham? But he doesn't. It's another thing of going to the east. He's making a wrong choice again. Anytime we see someone going to the east, it's going away from where you should be. It's going away from God. The name Zoar means small or insignificant. The city is spared, but not because they're righteous. Verse 23 through 26 says, the sun had risen on the earth when Lot came to Zoar. Then the Lord rained on Sodom and Gomorrah sulfur and fire from the Lord out of heaven. And he overthrew those cities and all the valley and all the inhabitants of the cities and what grew on the ground. But Lot's wife behind him looked back, and she became a pillar of salt. So once Lot makes it to Zoar, all hell breaks loose, literally. Well, it actually doesn't come from hell, it comes from the sky. Verse 24, Lord is used twice. That's unusual. Jewish commentators call the term a plural of majesty, while Christian commentators see something of the Trinity here. So have you ever heard theories of how this fire and sulfur thing happened? So here's some. There was a volcano. Sulfur rises with the hot lava that spews out. But if it was this, it's pretty miraculous that the volcano destroyed only the cities that were wicked and not Zoar. And it happened at the exact time God said. There are sulfur deposits near the Dead Sea today, though. Another one says that an asteroid hit Austria and threw molten ash to Sodom and Gomorrah. But again, still a miracle if that was the way, because it doesn't hit everything else. We learned earlier that there are tar pits in this region. And if they were hit by lightning and raining fire, that would cause everything to ignite and explode. Could have been a cosmic airburst meteor. A cosmic airburst meteor. You'll have to look that up. A meteor that explodes in the sky and rains down things. Or it could have been just God throwing sulfur and fire down at them. Whatever way, it was a miracle. It happened. Even if God used natural phenomenon, he timed it. And it happened when he said. So Sodom and Gomorrah are judged completely, severely, but only after God confirmed just how wicked they were. And he provides a witness for all this. Not a great one. Lot. Now there's many that believe these cities are buried under the Dead Sea. But their complete destruction is a testament to God's judgment and grace in delivering the righteous. Before this time, this area was beautiful, it was productive. That's why Lot chose to go to that area. But Lot's wife, remember the angel said, don't turn around. Well, Lot's wife did, and poof, salt pillar. Did she not make it to Zoar? Or did she look out from the city? Another theory comes up that she stayed too long. She didn't get into Zoar, and hot rock from a volcano fell in the sky on her, and she became a solid lump. Now, there's a strange formation at the southern end of the Dead Sea. It's a mountain of salt, 700 feet high and 5 miles long. 5 miles long, sorry. It's too much salt to be explained by evaporation from the Dead Sea. And when it says she looked back, the Hebrew word means she stared intently. It wasn't just a glance. She was longing for her life, missing what she had given up. Luke 17:28 through 33 talks, in there Jesus says at the end times, it would be like the times of Lot. And he said, remember Lot's wife. He's saying, don't get so caught up in the things of the world that you delay when it's time to go. No Christian should have a heart like Lot's wife. We shouldn't have a heart that longs for a corrupt world. We need to look forward to deliverance, not back at a world that's passing away and ripe for judgment. So here's a thought. As the two men went into the wicked city of Sodom, Christ came into our wicked world. The men persuaded Lot to leave the city. Christ calls us to leave the ways of the wicked men. The men who wouldn't leave the wicked life, they die. In the same way, people who don't follow Christ to safety, they will die. Verses 27 through 29. And Abraham went early in the morning to the place where he had stood before the Lord. And he looked down toward Sodom and Gomorrah, and toward all the land of the valley. And he looked, and behold, the smoke of the land went up like the smoke of a furnace. So it was that when God destroyed the cities of the valley, God remembered Abraham and sent Lot out of the midst of the overthrow when he overthrew the cities in which Lot had lived. This is probably inserted to make sure it was clear that Lot wasn't rescued on his own account, but through the intercessory prayer of Abraham. It's the second time Abraham saved Lot. The sense was that he was deeply moved by his encounter with God, and so he went back to relive the memories, and that then he saw all the smoke and fire. But it's hard to believe he wouldn't have heard a big commotion when all this was happening. Abraham sees the smoke of the cities and their destruction, and he knows immediately what happened. But he also knows that God had rescued Lot because God said he would. Those ruins would be the reminder of the consequence of sin forever. From Abraham and his descendants, it's a visual picture. For us, it's a symbolic picture. We all know Sodom and Gomorrah. Even those that haven't studied the Bible at all, they've heard the phrase Sodom and Gomorrah. Verse 30 through 32 says, Now Lot went up out of Zoar and lived in the hills with his 2 daughters, for he was afraid to live in Zoar. So he lived in a cave with his 2 daughters. And the firstborn said to the younger, Our father is old, and there is not a man on earth to come into us after the manner of all the earth. Come, let us make our father drink wine, and we will lie with him, that we may preserve offspring for our father. We don't get a clear picture of why Lot and his daughters decide to leave Zoar, or why the people of Zoar don't like them, but out of fear they leave, and they go up to the mountains to live in the cave. Maybe they're looking at him saying, what makes you so great that you were saved, and all our friends and family that lived in Sodom and Gomorrah and all the people in the valley, they're all dead, and the valley's all burned up, and it's your fault. Maybe. We don't know how long Lot was in Zoar, but enough to get a stock of wine, which they brought with them. That was important. Well, that was their drink. But they have fermented stuff. Now, Lot's daughters seem desperate, and this causes them to sin. There's some that say they believe the whole world had died with Sodom and Gomorrah. I always thought that was possible, but now it doesn't make sense because they had Zoar. They knew there were survivors. Another thought, maybe they hated their neighbors so much that they didn't want children to be tainted by their lack of morals. Whatever it is, I couldn't find any commentaries that justified it. It was wrong. Throughout Middle Eastern culture, incest is wrong. So they are sinning. Lot could take his daughters out of Sodom, but he couldn't take Sodom out of his daughters. In a sense, they were looking back, and they are sinning. Verse 33 through 38. So they made their father drink wine that night, and the firstborn went in and lay with her father. He did not know when she lay down or when she arose. The next day the firstborn said to the younger, Behold, I lay last night with my father. Let us make him drink wine together tonight also. Then you go in and lie with him, that we may preserve offspring from our father. So they made their father drink wine that night also. And the younger arose and lay with him, and he did not know when she lay down or when she arose. Thus both the daughters of Lot became pregnant by their father. The firstborn bore a son and called his name Moab. He is the father of the Moabites to this day. The younger also bore a son and called his name Ben-Ami. He is the father of the Ammonites to this day. So does this whole thing make you a little uncomfortable? You have to wonder if they both got pregnant the first time, or did they repeat this act over and over until they got pregnant? Now, Lot isn't so innocent in this. It says they made their father drink wine. Did they force it down his throat? He hadn't been a good example. He led his family to live in Sodom. Ironically, in his own drunkenness, Lot carried out the same thing that he had offered to the men of Sodom, to lay with his daughters. The result? Moab and Ami. Their descendants, the Moabites and the Ammonites, they are going to become enemies and obstacles for Israel, just like the descendants of Ishmael. They're going to become enemies of Israel, just like the descendants of Ishmael. We're going to run into them a lot. Now, one of their most famous descendants is Ruth. She's a Moabite, and she's an ancestor of Jesus. So God is still working through this. One of Lot's daughters is an ancestor of Jesus. Another ancestor of Jesus is Rehoboam, Solomon's son. His mother was Naamah, an Ammonite. Lot's life caused problems in the past, in the present, and the future, all because of his love for the world. So we are done with Lot. We're not going to hear any more about him. Not a good end. So in the next session, we are going to pick up again with the story of Abram. Thank you for joining. Click like, click subscribe. Enjoy having you with us. Thank you.